So folks, we'll kick off. Greg, thank you for not for joining us, thank you for your hospitality. We've just done a tour of your massive facility here on the outskirts of Belfast. Great to get an insight of the brand, but for me it was really refreshing to get an insight of the man behind the brand, the highs, the lows, the imperfections, the ups, the downs, the realistic entrepreneurial journey. And I suppose if we bring you back to your student days where you had an idea of actually getting into a brand that you didn't spend your childhood on, the likes of manufacturing and engineering, how did it come about that you decided to devote so much of your time to launching Blk Box, or what it is now?
Yeah, look, it wasn't actually Blk Box at the start. Rebranded the company twice actually, so it was third time lucky, but I touched on it when we were doing the tour. I played Gaelic football, and I was probably the least talented from a skill point of view, and I just found going to the gym and training made me and the team a better athlete. So I just wanted the equipment for myself, so I was my own customer, and you could see this trend of CrossFit functional training in America, and back then in UK and Ireland there wasn't anyone really doing it. Back then it was mostly big cardio brands and machines. Downloaded pictures of the equipment, as I said, put it online, and people started ringing me. So yeah, with the benefit of hindsight, it was a lean startup. If any of you have read that book, it's a pretty good book, and was able to test the market and see if there was demand, and there was. I didn't mention it earlier, but I actually pivoted, is this trendy term for winging it and changing direction. But I then met a guy, Fergus Conley, he was like a sports scientist for Liverpool and Dublin GA and stuff, and he told me to get into supplements because he was like, oh, you'll not sell much equipment because it'll last too long. And at that stage I probably wasn't confident enough, and I was only starting out, so I listened to him and got into supplements. But that was a fairly difficult business, where you're having to order quite a lot of stock up front, and then you're getting it back in dribs and drabs, and then you're competing with Optimum Nutrition, Kinetic, etc. So pivoted back out of that, but yeah, that was actually the currency. So the teacher I told you I got to design the first piece of equipment, I paid him with protein that we just had out of stock, and then miles. That was the currency. That was how I was paying people. It was like all these going out of date supplements. We went back into the equipment. At the start it was called Elite Fitness and Performance, which is a fairly bad name. We used to actually have a sign on the Ormo Road. Don't know if any of you would have seen it, because I'm from Coleraine, but I kind of knew that you'd have to get to a city to probably succeed. So my friend had a uniform shop, Burns & Co. in Ormo Road, and I just stuck up a sign on their unit next door, just faking it till you make it, which I believe in. And but then I realised the name wasn't great, rebranded it to EFP Gyms, which was even a worse name, and then come up with the name Blk Box. Actually was in, we paid an agency a fair bit, and they couldn't come up with a name, and then I was had a few too many coffees in Established and was driving through Hill Street, and then Blk Box, the music venue. I was like, kind of like that name, and I texted to Miles, our commercial director, and he always likes to be a little bit contrarian and challenge my ideas, which I think's a good thing. Can be a tiny bit annoying sometimes when you're like, just do this. But he came up with the logo, in fairness, and it hasn't really changed since that was 2014, I think it was. So, I just took a chance, and look, it was a bit easier for me because I was just out of uni and I had nothing to lose. Thankfully, my parents were, I think my friend circle, if I was to look back at it, my friend circle, a lot of their parents were quite successful and maybe forcing them down a route, lawyer, whatever else, and mine were quite hands-off and gave me the freedom to figure out what I wanted to do, and thankfully it's worked out.
Before we go into the journey of building the business, something that really struck me as we were walking around the shop floor was your mindset, in that you've taken a lot of risks. Like somebody says, don't focus on the equipment, focus on supplements. Like you have what seems to be, I don't know if this is articulated in the right way, but in a really healthy way, this very strong self-belief and like really backing yourself. How do you process that? Like that, your own mindset, your willingness to take risks, make mistakes, go again, keep tweaking. Where does that come from, and is that something you consciously develop?
I think I probably have. Look, I think you do. I don't know. Sometimes Jeff Bezos talks about regret minimization framework, which is a fancy way of, if you pretend you're 85 or 90 and look back and think, would you regret not taking that chance? He says that in a much fancier way, but like really, what is the fucking worst that can happen, And look, I know America's not, I'm sorry for swearing, but there might be a bit more. America's not perfect, but one thing I do like is their entrepreneurial culture in terms of like, if you fail, you go again. And really, like here, it's almost as if you've got cancer or some sort of disease if you make a mistake. So, and that's kind of, we touched on it earlier, the culture here is like, take a chance, and if anything, you're trying to build people's confidence up to take that leap. In terms of mindset, I do read lots of books. I'm a huge believer in, you are the sum of the 5 people you spend most of your time with, and I've made some changes that, people I grew up with and went to school or uni with, sometimes you have to reduce your time with them, like spending my weekend in a pub is not the best use of my time. And look, I love a drink as much as anyone, but I do think you do need to kind of get in a good circle, and you guys are ahead of the game here when you're in a circle like this. I think, training is hugely important. Like, if you can exercise every day, me personally, it's first thing in the morning. If you can do that, I think it just gives you compound interest in terms of energy, self-belief. Look, I'm not going to say I have had my own doubts, and I think if I look back some mistakes, I think but it's probably not trusting my own gut and maybe lacking a bit of confidence. I wouldn't say, I know when we were walking about there was maybe not bravado, but it's not always been like that, if I'm being honest. But you do need to sometimes just put the blinkers on and just go for it. And I do really love proving people wrong. If someone says to me, you can't do that, I'm like, I actually like that. I want more of that, and it can be hard. Like, there's been times when the business has been good and going well and stuff. I don't know. There's a guy, Brian Horowitz, he's got a book, I'll take out the name of it, but he talks about like a wartime CEO versus a good time CEO, and I like fucking the wartime stuff, If anything, I like to create a bit of a crisis, because I think it can, if things are good and easy and stuff, it can become, you just get a little bit too comfy. So like, I love just fucking pressure, stretching yourself. I do have an appetite for risk. I don't know where it came from, and it might backfire and get caught out at some point. I told you, I bought all that machinery without doing any payback calculations and stuff. Yeah, not advocating it, but I do think, you do need to trust your gut, and like I touched on it earlier, consultants are, you don't, talking of watches, you don't need to pay someone to take your watch and tell you the time. If you know your industry, like, trust yourself. Read books.
Yeah, I'm left school quite young, but have devoured books that I'm interested in: business, personal development, spirituality, things that just make you, I suppose, think differently. That I suppose informal education, the books, all the rest of it, do they help you go through those big decisions where you're investing £750,000 in a state-of-the-art machine Is there a bit of panic of what if we don't complete the orders to justify this? What if it breaks down? What if it works? Like the risks you've taken financially have worked out, but was there a bit of, oh shit?
Oh, 100%. And there still is, like payroll can still be a challenge in this business. But, the business has been bootstrapped, or it was, and I'm a big believer in that. Like, I think money does suffocate creativity. If you've got a shitload of money, you will get wasteful, whereas if you have very little money, you have to be extremely resourceful. There's a good book, I think it's A Beautiful Constraint, and it's turning these, people think constraints are a bad thing, but they're actually a really good thing. If you've only got a really small budget, you're going to need to punch above your weight. If you've not got a big team, you need to punch above your weight. So I think it is having that mentality that, constraints are actually a good thing in business. Like, I think if I started Blk Box with investment and a shitload of money, I genuinely do not think it would be a successful business. The reason it's been successful is every single penny was continually reinvested. I personally, as I touched on, I think when I spoke to Jim on the podcast, I personally haven't took a huge amount out of the business. Some people would say that's the wrong thing to do. Like, I'm not a flash guy. I don't really like fucking Ferraris and Porsches and stuff. That's not my thing. I would rather build a long-lasting business with a fairly nice house and stuff. That's important, yes, but I'm not one to be one of these flash guys buying fancy cars. I'd rather grow this business, and I think we still have so much more to do to become. I talk about us as a good company. I say we're not world-class business, and I think that's an important thing, where you need to just constantly be trying to improve. Because if you get lazy, and it's a dangerous thing in business.
That, suppose you're saying, wartime CEO, I like a bit of pressure, I want to keep improvement, that's important to me. How do you get 100 plus staff to buy into that continuous improvement as well, when it would be really easy to deliver big projects, go all hands on decks, and then be comfortable or complacent for a while?
Yeah, good question. I think it all comes down to culture, and I think there's a saying, something like the shadow of the leaders. I can't remember exactly what it, but basically means, if you're not living and breathing and living authentically in terms of the values, people can see that across the business. So I think you need to model and be authentic of what you're asking for people. I think when you're recruiting people, you need to make it clear what your culture is. I talked about us being a team, we're not a family. Make that very clear. I'd make it clear that working in Blk Box can be demanding. If you want a normal 9 to 5 for certain roles, that's not it. So I think it's just making it clear what your culture is, and rewarding people for if they're living and breathing by it. But also, there is some subcultures within Blk Box, I'll be honest. Not everyone's in here in the gym. We've got people that are welding, there's people in the warehouse, you've got young people in the office, you have some older people. And there is some subcultures, but ultimately, I think it's being transparent. Friday we'll send out a team update of all the projects we've did, and it's really rewarding, if you're a Man United fan or a whatever team, seeing that your work has helped deliver that. So that makes it quite appealing for people. And then I think there's just treating everyone fairly. There's not really this kind of hierarchy, or there's no fancy car parking spaces out the front and stuff. Everyone's at a peer level here. But I'm making it clear that I don't have all the answers, and the team, and being transparent, you know, if you make a mistake, sharing that. And I think, look, the one thing we have in Blk Box is authenticity, you know, we do live and breathe this, and yeah, it's been a fun journey so far.
Could you expand? I thought it was one of the most interesting things you'd said around the tour was we're a team, not a family, and there's certain standards expected, and you'd also said even in the interview process you will push people and try and put them off working here and be really clear and upfront with regards to the expectations. I think in the world of social media and certain books, there's this like projected style of perfect leadership, or that, you know, companies should be like a family and things like that. And you've went the other way and says, no, we have a team, certain standards, and there's performance, and we have to do that together. How have you implemented that? Because I think it's very refreshingly authentic and honest.
Yeah, how have I done it? So these are harder questions I was getting on the shop floor. Look, I think it is, you know, when you interview people, we share our core values. We tell them what the culture is like. We tell them what is expected of them. I think it's just being upfront. The people that haven't worked out in Blk Box, I don't think we've done that. There's been a misalignment where they think working in Blk Box is something very different. I think there's been some people, they just think they can take it, like it's not a place to come and take it easy. Like I said earlier, it's demanding. If you want to excel in here, and that's the good thing is, like, if you want to excel, you can move through the company fairly quick. Some of our most senior people in the business are in their early 30s, and they've just came in from university with a growth mindset and been willing to learn, and we will support them with resources, courses, CPD, getting out to other businesses. I just want to make it look, I'm not saying every day is fun in here. I would say it's actually not that fun a place to work, if I'm honest. But it's rewarding, and I think that's probably more important. Like, there's none of this fake fun stuff, you know, but it is rewarding for someone with the right mindset that they can really shape and make change both within the company and in the industry. But not everyone likes that. We've made all the mistakes, you name it, I've done it, in terms of hiring people from big companies. We hired someone once from the Big Four firm. Fuck, they bounced out of here quicker than anyone. But you know all this stuff, but sometimes when the pressure's on, you know the theory, but sometimes it does go out the window. Like, everyone knows, hire slow, fire fast, but that is much easier said than done, so it is. But just remember it, you know, we've made that mistake. Like, during COVID, the business was going like that. It was a case of just, if you've got a pulse, get a body in here, I don't care. And then we had to back out of that. We went from maybe 110 staff, then we went down to close to 70 maybe, and then now we're up around 170. I think we've nearly done the same mistake, if I'm honest. So I'd say, yeah, but it's hard when you're growing fast, you know, the pressure's on, you can make mistakes, but yeah.
How do you deal with the stress of growing a company so fast and having 170 mouths to feed?
Yeah, it doesn't bother me. I think if I look back to the first 10 years of the business, I did train, but I did probably come, you know, I did like a glass of wine at the weekend. I have actually seriously cut back, and I really focus on like putting my own oxygen mask on first. Again, I knew all of this. I think it is so important that you need to look after yourself, and you can't manage other people if you can't manage yourself. So like, if you're all over the place, missing diaries, one thing, like being late for meetings and stuff, like I don't really, that's one thing in here. If a meeting starts at 12, you should be in here 3 minutes to 12, because I think it sets the tone for the intensity and the seriousness of the meeting. Whereas there's been some other people that come from other companies and they're coming in at like 3 minutes past or 5 minutes, oh sorry, the meeting overran. That just, it sets the tone for the rest of the business. Oh, you're going to let that order go out late too, you know? So there's all these small things, like language is an important thing. I talked about, you know, clients is an important thing, and that's what we talk about. There's loads of other quirky things. People would think it's a bit of a cult here, but I think people buy into it. And we have had a few people that leave the business, they go somewhere else, and then they come back. And personally, I do like the odd boomerang, if I'm honest, because I think it's also a good sign to show that Blk Box is actually a good place to work. We're still a relatively small business. I don't think we always get it right. There still is more work to be done, but it's trying to make it as a good place to work, but also achieving some business success as well.
Before we look at kind of the vision for the next few years, if you were to reflect on the Blk Box journey to date, and obviously we're all here business owners of varying degrees, what would you say are 3 skills perhaps, or 3 attributes that any founder could implement in a positive way into a business that you've experienced firsthand?
Skill. I think you need to recognize, like, if you want to, well, you need to figure out what you want to do. Like, if you want to build a lifestyle business, fine, that's great. But if you don't want to build a lifestyle business, if you want to build a world-leading business, that's a whole different journey you want to go on. I'm not saying, again, some lifestyle business, I wish sometimes I was in one, you know, that there's people maybe making more money and they have a whole lot less stress, but that's not what I want to do. So I think it's figuring out, one, what you personally want. Then you need to be aware where you're strong, what your strengths are. Touched on it earlier. I didn't pass maths at school, so I know numbers is not my main strength. Where I'm good is probably building a team, sales, marketing, maybe a bit of brand and a few other things, but they're mainly where I'm comfortable. So I know I need to get other people in around me, finance, ops, project management. But I think it's building a team's like the number one thing. I mean, all businesses really is recruitment businesses, like, and regardless what you're doing, you need to be good at recruitment and have a fairly robust process and have good employer branding. And it's competitive out there, you know, like the inflation on wages, like, it's a really tough environment. But I personally, this whole like mentality of being a victim and stuff, it's like yes, UK, Ireland's maybe not the best environment for business, but just get on with it, you know. You can make it work. There's worse places to be. So I think that would be the most important thing, is having that mindset of, and that's why I actually like business, is it's like you have the ability to control things. If you want to achieve something, you can do it, and don't play victim in terms of blaming the politicians or the economy or whatever, because that's not going to take you to the next level. So yeah, getting your own mindset is like the most important thing. I read some good books at the start. Yeah, because I was not a reader, obviously, in school and stuff, and I think it was maybe Tim Ferriss was one of the first books. Then there was a few mindset ones. Tony Robbins I actually like. I know he's not everyone's cup of tea. I personally like the guy. I find listening to his stuff gives me a bit of energy. So I think it's just finding out what works for you. Yeah, like, fuck, if I'm, probably shouldn't even say it, if I'm coming into work pretty tired, get some Tony Robbins stuff on in the car or something, you come in with a bit more energy. You're obviously a fan of the cold immersion and stuff. All of that stuff 100% works. But I think you have to be different to succeed in business. You know, just doing normal things is not going to get you any sort of extraordinary results.
Yeah.
And I touched on it, work ethic is like the bedrock for me, is like, and I know balance and everything's, it's in vogue at the minute, but I don't believe in balance. I work pretty much every day because I find work almost like training. It gets easier the more you do it, you know, whereas you know yourselves, if you go on holiday and you fall off the training wagon, or you fucking got so many emails and stuff from a 2-week break, whereas if you just do a little bit and often, that's my approach. Look, I used to, at the start, work, I would have been an established Saturday and Sunday, and I used to view that as me getting ahead of the competition. They were all off on Saturday and Sunday. People used to think I fucking owned established or had shares in it, because I was in there just headphones in, just working as hard as I could. And it probably went a bit too far, because it wasn't the sole reason why I brought Ben in as MD. Look, you know, the reason I did it was I was always out trying to win business. I like the commercial, I like winning business, but then at that stage we had like 80, 90 people, and I always felt this tug of war of, you know, trying to win business, but also running the company, and I personally prefer the commercial side, so brought Ben on as MD, brought him on as non-exec for the first 12 months, and we said, look, if we don't kill each other, you can take over. And then when I brought him in, I kind of was a little bit out of the business at the start, and then we quickly realised that the business was just too immature, and I don't want to sound arrogant, but it wasn't ready to stand on its own 2 feet without me driving it forward. So I came back in running the sales function. Ben's more finance, he runs finance and some other stuff, but I'm sort of dealing with the strategy, product, sales side of things. So, and look, some of you might make that choice at some point of, I essentially fired myself. At that stage, I was the sole shareholder in the business, and it was my choice. And that was it was a difficult one to do, you know. Like, Ben's done some stuff that I wouldn't have done. Like, I'm not saying anything that I wouldn't say in front of him, you know. He's took a different approach, and we've had to maybe just course correct a little bit. But it might be for you guys, when it might be something you'll have to do at some point. All I would say is just take your time if you're going to make a change like that, as I did. It was a couple of years. But yeah, I'm actually working more now than I've ever have. People keep saying to me, "Oh, you've took a step back." I'm like, a step back? I'm working more than ever, but I probably have a bit more energy doing it, because I think it can't, like, having a meeting with finance, HR, it used to drain me, you know, like, because one, I don't have an understanding, and I read so many finance books and I read all HR, but I didn't totally understand it, you know, whereas like sales, commercial, I know that, and that gives me energy. So I kind of selfishly was like, I'll just focus on stuff that I like doing. Yeah. But I appreciate not everyone can do that. Yeah, like there's this whole thing of work on your business, not in it. Again, it's good in theory, but let's be honest, like, you need to be in the business if you want to drive it forward. Yeah, and I'm fairly like, yeah, I'd be probably more a fan of founders. You know, it's like certain founders can do stuff that even, you know, like Ben, the guy, he's a lot of experience and stuff, but there's stuff I can do that he says that himself that he could never dream to do, you know. So yeah, I would say back yourself as well. Yeah.
So I love that, and you've kind of, on paper, have taken a bit of a backwards step, but with that in mind and looking to the future of Blk Box, because you'd mentioned you're heading out to China next week, you have an office out there, you're doing work in the States. I suppose if you could communicate the vision over the next few years and where you foresee your role in that, if from a succession point of view.
Yeah, look, I'll be just doing more of what I'm doing, focusing on sales. So I manage the whole sales function. We've just hired someone in Germany, we have someone in France. It'll be probably continuing to build out that international team, having someone in every major country in Europe, and then likewise America we're expanding into as well. Maybe not just as aggressively as we are into Europe. So yeah, I think for us it's trying to dominate, you know, UK, I think we are the dominant company. We are introducing maybe some slightly more competitively priced products, because I think we do well more at the premium side, but maybe some home gym and PT studio, amateur sports teams. I think we've probably lost a little bit of that's what the business initially was built on, and then we've had some competition come through that have a much lower cost profile. So I think we can do a bit more in the UK at the lower end whilst maintaining what we have, but then expanding across Europe and America. Middle East we do a bit, but obviously it's a challenging market right now with the current war and stuff. We'll aim to grow around 20-25% each year. I think for me it needs to be sustainable, and you know, it's all I always think about long term. You know, the reason I bought all that machinery is it the right thing for the business long term? And probably did. I think Bezos, you know, with Amazon, he's always thinking long term and stuff, and I do like listening to. He's a very successful and smart guy. I took some stuff from what they did about just the importance of thinking long term, but you also need to hunt. So it's a mixture of hunting and farming. That's the two things. You know, you need to hunt for short term, but you need to farm and get the foundations for long term growth. But a slight bias towards longer term. That's the
farming.
The right thing, because I think most people think the short term, and they make choices on that, whereas it's a bit more contrarian to go long term, make proper investments. But yeah, probably a slightly riskier strategy, maybe.
Oh, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you. Guys, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.